So I'd like to introduce you all to, this is Wacey Alpha Cody, and he is the Libertarian candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives. So he's running, so he's one of the people that you'll have the opportunity to vote for on November 3rd. And so I guess I'm going to let him introduce himself because I'm always bad at doing that. But thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Thanks for breakfast. So, a little about me. I know some of you already asked just when I sent your visiting. I rodeoed for years. I rode bucking horses. If you can't tell, I've got a little stiff. Some of that might be due to riding bucking horses for over a decade. It was a lot of fun. I got to travel all over the country. If you have any questions, feel free to jump in and ask. Other than that, I'm just kind of a normal cat, in my opinion. I went to college, worked and got a master's degree in counseling. I worked in mental health. I've worked with as a welder, as a horseshoer. That's part of the reason why I like that B on your standard, because some things, you know, you don't always work out at where you are in life, if that makes sense. If you're working at this place or at this job, it might not be best suited for you. And I'm a prime example. I've found where I really like working at a vet clinic, but I'm happy there, and I think there's a lot to that. I know one thing I guess I'd like to, if no questions, is I think a key component of health is we need, to me, this is my opinion, we need to unify mental health and physical health. Again, using me as an example, at one of my previous employment places, I had a blood pressure of 200 over 100. And I've always had perfect health, blood pressure other than that. But the stress that I was taking on was causing a physical reaction. And it just continues to support that our healthcare system needs to unify physical health and mental health, because I can't like I'm not supposed to take a saw and cut you in half. So how does our healthcare system say this will deal with this and this deal with this when we're one person and you have to treat everybody as a whole person? And I think that's a deficit. I think that's a problem with healthcare.
Okay, I got something that's a true fact. Whenever I lay in a coma for 2 months, and the doctors and nurses came in several times a day, poking me with a needle to try to get me to respond. Laid there stiff as a board. And Wilbur Derringer, a buddy of mine's dad, came in and visited me and he could have real easily been his boy. And he gets a can of Copenhagen out of his back pocket, packs it pink. When he opened that can, by the grace of God, the smell of Copenhagen filled that room, and I always did.
Yeah.
And doctors were in the room still, and when he opened that can, by the grace of God, the smell of Copenhagen filled that room. And I'm laying there, sniffing for it, and the doctor said, "What is that smell? He's reacting."
Yeah.
And Wilbur said, "I just took a pinch of Copenhagen." He said, "You can't have that in the hospital, but let me see that can." And he stuck it under my nose, moved it from side to side. I followed it, pulled it away, and gave it back. I just sit up in bed.
Thank you for sharing that, Brian. But if we could, I'd really like I want to really respect Mr. Cody's time. So if we could kind of let him talk, and then we'll have a chance to ask questions too. But I just, everybody has wonderful stories, and you could be here all day hearing all the amazing stories.
I don't have anything, so I gotta go to a lunch meeting at work.
You already said that.
What do you currently do right now?
So I work at a vet clinic, and it's odd how things interrelate. And so I work at this a small vet clinic, and realistically, we are more complicated than a dog, absolutely. But the doctors I work with, they're the pediatrician, they're the oncologist, they're the, dogs really realize that they sometimes have anxiety, so they're the kind of psychiatrist for their patient. And you really see, or I've really been fortunate to see these doctors treat their patients from a very whole, individual, this animal specific, and it helped me, solidify my belief our healthcare system ought to do that. But to answer your question, I work as a vet tech at a care tech. And I always really liked animals, and I think that was part of my goal when I was in the mental health field, was to integrate animals into my practice. I wanted to really utilize therapy dogs and work, because I don't know about all of you, but did any of you like listening to birds or seeing birds or playing with a dog? See, you nod your head, yeah. That so much
I like working cattle.
yeah, so I love my calves. So so much of us as a person is involved with parks and being outdoors and part of nature. And I think again, this is my opinion, a lot of our problems and stress in life come from being alienated from that. I don't know if any of you have ever taken a walk in the park and just listened to the birds, but how much more enjoyable you feel after playing with your dog or playing with your cat. And I think that was something I was missing. I always had a dog when I was working, but now that's fully encompassed in where I work, so it's really enjoyable for me.
Somebody online who has a question, so if you don't mind, we have Zoom for people who aren't able to read
I
it.
can't see it from, could you
Yeah,
read it to me?
they are, we're not able to pull it up, so I'm kind of live casting it from my phone, so we
Okay.
won't be able to see them, but he messaged me and wanted me to read it. So he said, for fiscal year 2020, the U.S. deficit hit $3 trillion and change. For me, the problem with such high debt levels is that it will constrain what the government can do to meet the country's future needs. Spending will always continue to rise and is far outpace tax revenue. Do you see this as a problem? And if so, what are your ideas to tackle this enormous problem? From Ruben.
So, Ruben, you said?
Yes.
So Ruben, I absolutely believe it's a problem. I don't know about everyone here, but I have to manage my budget, and I expect our government to reflect the people of this nation. If we all have to manage our budget, I think the government should as well. And there's two ways to increase revenue. Two ways to increase your profit margin. One, increase revenue, or two, decrease expenditures. And I learned at an early place in life, my father always taught me, use up, wear out, make do, and do without. And I think part of the problem is our government is spending other people's money. They spend our money because they have no way to make money, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So to me, we absolutely need to reduce the amount of expenditures government makes, and that means reducing the size and scope of the federal government so that local, city, county governments can then help their populations with it. Instead of just, I guess the way I would explain it, instead of throwing, shooting a cannonball at the problem, you can use a scalpel that way and truly address the needs of any given area and get all of that, the tax revenue and the expenditures out of the federal government as a whole. So I guess to sum up, yes, it's a huge problem, and the way I would address it is just quit spending people's money. It's not the government's money to ever have in the first place.
I got a question.
Yes,
Well, actually, it's a three-part question. What is your ideas and how would you go about human trafficking as far as the foster children, orphanage children, and then how they're human trafficked for a profit margin through the CPS, and the health field? Do you agree or disagree that majority of all less fortunate, I guess you'd say, is most of their medical is due to some kind of organized crime and violence? And the third question is how would your remedy go about breaking down on organized crime gang issues, whether it's in or out of the circuit legal system?
Okay, so just to make sure, CPS as and orphanages as an element of human trafficking. Agree, disagree that organized crime has a big impact on the less privileged healthcare, and then how would I address gang and organized crime? Okay.
So it all runs in together, but it's a three-part question.
Right, yes, sir. So first part is I don't know the answer to whether CPS is human trafficking.
Okay.
The only way I can answer that is CPS is a element of government. It's an element of state government, and the one thing me as a federal person could do would help bring to light that children in CPS custody are being used to profit a system that is state run. Because that is, to me, against everything the United States ever stood for.
They get 30 or what, 27,000 and up for each child through Child Protective Services.
And that's back to, so I'm running for federal office, but as I said a minute ago, the more local you make any government decision, the better it is for the people of that area. So the state of Texas runs CPS. The state of Texas is huge.
It's got its own homeland, Texas Rangers.
Right. So if our CPS was truly controlled by Tom Green County or the city of San Angelo, the Child Protective Services as an organization would be much more accountable to you and every one of us in this room, because they're tailored to help the people of this community, not tailored to help an entire state.
Each district has its own CPS, foster children, orphanage children, in three separate offices.
Right. And so I'm not big on government, but having a independent, I guess, investigator, if you would, that has no dog in the fight. They're just there to make sure the children's rights as a human being are not being violated. And however, because those funds, if they're misused, they're misused, but those funds I can assume originated to say, hey, you're a good law-abiding person that can parent this kid, while their biological parents get over whatever issues they're facing. Would you take care of this child? And then those funds are allocated for that. Do people abuse those funds? Absolutely. Are kids lost in the systems? Absolutely. And the only way I would say to solve that is continually make the system smaller and smaller, so that it can so that an independent person can truly look at it and say, wow, that's wrong. We need to figure out what's going on there. To the agree, disagree, to my knowledge, I've never been a victim of any type of organized crime. I'm not a police officer. I know there is a lot of organized crime in the nation. I can easily imagine how cartels or large gangs can control the health care of people in poverty, because you look at the way poverty-stricken people are responded to by the authorities. A lot of time, if I'm a rich lawyer whose son something happened to, and I go to the police department's going to take that very seriously on day one. If I'm a homeless individual that's being victimized, they're going to shutter me off to the side. And realistically, that's a problem. But again, it's having enabling the police, enabling all of the jurisdictions to be accountable to their citizens in that locale, and then people that see the value in a homeless individual advocating for that person and saying, whoa, 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 just because this person doesn't have tons of money does not mean they were any less victimized, and really holding the police accountable. And then when it comes to how does a group do that, you say, hey, police chief, me and homeless Joe used to get coffee all the time, and he would complain to me that the SAPD never did anything for him, and why should I re-elect a person that does not see the value in this human being and prioritizes only this person? And then we as a group find an individual that says, I value all people regardless of their financial well-being, and no criminal organization is going to take advantage of a marginalized group. And then I think now this is your third aspect of your question. You then find, once you identify people that will really use those agencies that defend us, that protect us, you have them that target criminal enterprises, and you say, we don't care what type of lawyers you have, this behavior will not be allowed in our community. You're not going to run massive criminal organizations, because sadly money buys people. And if I've got the money, I can sway a judge, it is possible to sway a judge, it's possible to sway a police chief. And ideally we elect people that put the humanity that is in all of us ahead of, crime money, essentially. But the way I by myself can tackle that, I don't know if it's possible for a single entity to really stop organized crime. I think there needs to be an element of, again, although this is weird for me to say, a certain element of national funds that addresses organized crime. But again, on an ideal level, you're enabling the city of San Angelo, the state of Texas, Tom Green County Sheriff to truly address organized crime in this area, because organized crime is going to look different here than Chicago, Illinois.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it's back to the community and the citizens working with their law enforcement and saying, this is what's going on in my neighborhood, how can we work together? And also, on that flip side is us working with the police forces in our community. If you see somebody being victimized, regardless of who or what they are, you let the appropriate law enforcement officer know that, hey, my friend just got raped, my friend did this, my friend got their money stolen. And then you continually to hold because police officers aren't elected, but they are public servants, which means they serve all of us. And if they're not doing their job, then all of us need to know that our public servants aren't serving us. And sometimes that means rooting out a bad apple. That being said, I do believe the vast majority of policemen are good people.
I agree with you.
I got a question. Do you think the district attorney or the sheriff should be reviewed by a committee as to the decisions that they make? Because a lot of cases get swept under the rug because of their decisions.
So I am a huge proponent of transparency. I think anything and everything should be laid bare. I think to your point, we are, when we elect a sheriff, we are the committee that decides to elect that person. Now, does there need to be something like throughout the year or throughout every 2 years so that they're not able to hide stuff the entire time and then we just have to wait for re-election? I think that's on a community by community basis, and I think if the community of Tom Green County wants to create a committee that would monitor the district attorney or a committee that would monitor the sheriff, then I think the sheriff ought to be willing to do that or understand that the community has the right to elect a new sheriff. And if there's not one in place, then they should create one themselves. Because
I find sometimes communities don't take action when they need to, and don't feel it's their responsibility to do anything about that.
well, and
anything.
that starts to roll. I mean, kind of that's to a degree. I don't know if you hear the phrase "slippery slope," but if a community likes their sheriff, even if the sheriff is not a perfect human being, does the community have the right to elect a crappy person? And I think that's more of a philosophical question. I don't have that answer. I think ideally the good people of the community would unite and say, we're electing a person that's not a good person. We need to do something about that.
But we have evil prevails when good people do nothing. And that does exist.
Yes.
And there is no recourse for that. Unless the good people do something.
And I think that's,
That's a hard one. It
Yeah,
means
it
more
is.
money, more funds in a different direction than what the state is willing to go. They don't like reviewing DAs because it puts them in a spot.
right.
And a community that's elected him. But yet at the same time, I think it's necessary when you have cases where people are found to be innocent, and we pay millions of dollars for those innocent people to be in jail.
And I think, to your point, it's problematic and a symptom of what I call the brother-in-law club. They're all in it together. This district attorney will back that district attorney, who will then back this district attorney, because we're all part of the same political little close-knit plan. And
They
then
know
here on
each
the
other.
local level, we have people at the state level that, no, don't listen to that guy, he's lying, when this person's telling the truth, and then the state is backing a dishonest person.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they change your precinct terms differently. Like this one will have a term ending in 2020. This one will have a term ending in 2021. The next one, so they can.
That you're not all in it together.
Not
that
elected
way
all
they
at
can,
one time.
That way they can give insight
So you have-
of the way they want the way they want to keep their precinct going. Not because a lot of politicians don't want change.
Right.
They want to keep it the same way.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they all the precincts, the judge terms, the precinct terms, the senator terms, the sheriff, the marshal, the city police, all their terms expire at different.
So they all kind of are able to, if you get a new person in there, what you're saying, that person gets groomed essentially. Okay. Man, that's to what you just said, that's a hard one to fix. I think to me, this is how I address it, is I believe that the good in people will triumph the evil in greed. Every case is not like that, and people get victimized and abused by the system. But I do believe our criminal justice system was founded on the idea that it's better to let an innocent person go free No, I'm sorry. A guilty
goes
person
free.
go free than an innocent person rot in jail. It's better for us as a society to say, how does our criminal justice system rehabilitate this individual, and then have them be a contributing member of society, not lock somebody up and throw away the key. That is some massive criminal justice reform. That is taking the science of psychology and putting it into practice and really looking at what we're doing in 2020 in the United States of America and saying we cannot do what we've done since 1950 because it didn't work then. And not only did it not work, we now can scientifically show how it doesn't work and how we need to help people in certain positions because then they become a contributing member of society. But I don't know if, I mean, that's a huge nationwide argument that needs to be won, and
It's an economic shift also.
right, and scientists in the leading fields of psychology need to be out there every day saying what we're doing is wrong until the common everyday person that's not involved in criminology, not involved in mental health, not involved in criminal justice reform realizes, holy crap, this isn't working, and not only is it not working, it's costing me money at the end of the year. And I think if everybody understands the power of a dollar, and I think that's one thing that when you're talking about how can you address these issues is show how it costs the taxpayer money in the long run to keep a corrupt individual elected, because they're allowing crime potentially to occur in the community. They're allowing continued abuses to occur, and they're stagnating growth in the economic development of the community. And if you can diversify or disperse a tax burden on a larger population, it makes it easier on each and every one of us. And I think that is kind of the route to success. But
Make sure I understood, we talked about the organized things, the children, we discussed the political term of their different terms expire, and you discussed the political as a whole, not as a small town. And what else?
Covered a lot.
Yes.
We actually have another
We have
question
another
too,
question.
so.
Okay, so this is from Ruben.
did I answer your question? Okay.
This one's from Ruben again. The Trump administration is quietly working toward a proposed regulation that would greatly tighten eligibility requirements for Americans to claim or stay on disability. The White House initiative to lower federal welfare spending. They would add another category called medical improvement likely to the qualification list, and it will greatly increase the frequency of continuing disability reviews, which monitors the recipient's eligibility required for benefit continuation. Medical improvement likely would stop you from getting disability for the first time or will disqualify you from getting further benefits. Would you support this proposed regulation change, and if so, why?
So this answer is going to be kind of strange, and I hope I can explain it to follow up to. Thank you. So, Ruben, I don't believe the federal government should be in the practice of creating Medicare, Medicaid, healthcare, anything. I think we are worse served because of federal intervention, because when it comes to the federal government, it regulates all of us to demographics. Do you have 2 legs, 1 leg? Are you able-bodied or are you not? You cannot have 325 million people under one system and not relegate them to statistics and demographics. With that being said, there are absolutely people in our communities that have trouble taking care of themselves or need assistance in taking care of themselves, whether that is physically, mentally, or a combination thereof. So, again, first part, I don't think the federal government should be doing it. I think we would all be better suited if Texas controlled that element over the U.S. government. if Tom Green County controlled that element over Texas, if the city of San Angelo controlled that element over Tom Green County. The more you can reduce the size of the government agency that's hopefully helping people with disabilities, the better they can target the individual. Because let's use MHMR as an example. MHMR is a massive thing here in San Angelo. If I myself had the money to create a center, I could target and help whatever population I was willing to help. And then truly, like I said, be a scalpel. Now we're being very person-centered. What's your problem? What do you need help with? This is how I can help you. And then you go around the table and you help everyone in the room that way. It's not a massive multi-trillion-dollar agency that's also politicized on top of that. And I think that's a massive reason why we need to get more and more out of the federal government, because as long as it's in the realm of the federal government, it's going to be politicized. And for every yes, there's going to be a no. And if we get that out of their control, instead of it being locked and gridlocked and bureaucracy, it can truly help people, and the people of the community can dictate how that help is used. So would you ask if that kind of made sense, how I explained that?
Ruben, I think you can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh,
I mean, it's the question itself is not easy, but it's happening. So, but I just wanted to get your feelings.
so I mean, that's to answer your question. If I don't think anybody in this nation would walk by a starving child, if that kind of makes sense. If the federal government, like if say I had the power to yay or nay, as the last remaining vote, and I said nay, I believe that the states would step in and figure out a way to rectify that, and if not, ideally the communities themselves would figure out a way to bridge that gap. But the only way they're going to be empowered to bridge that gap is if the federal government was out of the way. So if push came to shove, yeah, I would vote no, with the belief that then I could advocate in Tom Green County, like, hey, now there is an actual deficit because I'm the one that shut this program down. Your tax dollars are now still in this community. How can we use those tax dollars in this community to benefit the citizens of our community?
If you were elected, that's something you would advocate for.
I would advocate for local control of all of any health aspect, any welfare agency that because I mean the issue, it's like I like geography because the United States is so huge. The issues in winter in Minnesota are different than the issues in winter in San Angelo, Texas. And if you use a blanket agency to try to deal with those issues, you're spinning your wheels. A family in Minnesota that is either homeless, destitute, or poverty-stricken has a much different problem set than one in San Angelo. Is it possible to freeze in San Angelo? Yes. Is it likely? No. So I would advocate that we need to get this out of the federal government because it's creating more waste and more inefficiencies than it is being a benefit to the people of this nation. Let's get it back in local authorities, or even more ideally, get it back to churches, centers that are community funded, that aren't an element of government, so that they are never politicized, that they're just there to serve the people. And regardless of one's political belief, you see the value in this center being an asset to your community.
Okay, so the question said welfare, but I didn't mean that in a starving child sort of sense, or family. I meant it more in a person with a severe mental disability.
Correct.
So,
I think
you're saying that can be handled at the local level too?
yes, sir. I think
Okay.
if a group of us were walking across, and just, 4 or 5 citizens of San Angelo were walking down the street and saw a severely disabled individual that was unable to care for themselves. That group of people would start to reflect and say, how can we help this person that's a member of our society? And then that treatment would be addressed to that individual's needs, and it would be, because a lot, again, when I worked at MHMR, a lot of the programs that were available, but they were available in Houston, or they were available in DFW, because we were right at this perfect level where we're kind of small town, but we're big city. We have some resources, we don't have others. So then technically this resource is available, but nobody provides it in a geographic range that's within 200 miles. So we needed to have the capacity to use the resources that were available in the immediate area, and I think that's what I'm trying to drive at, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I've asked the same question before. How can we enforce to be able to stop bullying in schools? Can we have a better bullying campaign?
How can we stop bullying in schools and then have a better bullying campaign, or anti-bullying?
Yes.
So,
Anti-violence.
in
Anti-violence.
anti-violence. So, those are, I'll start with like the violence part, because we associate violence with school shootings, right? Or I do. That's not all violence, but that's one at the top. I don't know can any of y'all remember the high school you went to, or schools? Was it a lot of straight halls and limited entrances and exits?
Yes.
That is literally a shooting gallery. And to call a spade, the architecture of these buildings needs to be adjusted where a limited group of people cannot line people up in a hall and shoot them. I was one of the first, my age was one of the first ones that did the shelter in place for school shootings. Everyone in the school knew where everybody lined up on the wall. You could just walk down the hall and shoot people in the back, but that was the best they could do. There was nothing more than probably 2 half-inch pieces of sheetrock, which at most would stop a .22 caliber bullet, not going to stop a bullet larger and more powerful than that. So you're just sticking us in a like shooting fish in a barrel, so to speak. When it comes to that event occurring, our schools need to be designed to where the actual structure of the building helps safeguard people. Outside, how many of you went to school with really big parking lots and no cover in the parking lot? I did. We need to have, those concrete like retaining walls, have those in the parking lot so you can hide if somebody is actively shooting. There's still something that's going to stop a bullet. Don't. That's an easy fix. Just they won't. From here on out, we design buildings that aren't shooting galleries. 2, violence. We cannot legislate a perfect society. We can try, but it'll never work. When it comes to individual, like me against you or you against me, both individual violence and or bullying, I think it's difficult to pick one fix because there's multiple reasons. If I'm a really big guy at school and my dad beats me at home because I'm weaker than dad, I'm going to take that out on my peer because that's how I understand me, peer-to-peer relationships. So sitting me down and saying you can't be mean to people isn't going to work with me, because the way I understand human interaction is the powerful beats on the weak. That you address that cause by addressing the family dynamic in the home. If I am picking on you, let's say because I have nicer clothes and I'm the popular kid in school and you don't have nice clothes. That's again, that you have to address that style of bullying with a different treatment because that cause is different. And the way you would address that is trying to not necessarily enrich this person, but educate this person on clothes do not make the value of a human being. And then, is there something from home doing that? Again, school is not going to counteract home teaching. If home is teaching, this, school can't trump that. It just won't happen. So, addressing whatever the case is at a case-by-case issue, because there's no blanket statement that's going to end bullying or end violence. Then, understanding what bullying is. So, my brother would pick on me. He's bigger than me, he's stronger than me. But I always had the ability to rectify by when it got out of hand, I could tell my parents and my parents could fix it. Bullying occurs when there's a imbalance of power, whether that's just in the victim's mind, like a little person can bully a big person. If I think you're more powerful than me, I can be a victim of bullying. So there needs to be that imbalance of power, and then you need to be able to show that it happens. Because to me, one of the problems that has actually made bullying, true clinical bullying, worse is the media and politicians have politicized bullying. And then they use bullying as a catch-all term when somebody's being picked on, when somebody's being abused, when somebody's being mistreated, and bullying is a very specific thing. So then, say I punched a girl, and the boyfriend punched me, and then I go to the principal office and say Bobby is bullying me. Technically speaking, Bobby did not bully me. Bobby punched me because I punched his girlfriend. And that is a different, again, case than true bullying. So educating people on what bullying is, educating the students on how to address it. So if you're being bullied, this is what bullying is. Now this is what you need to do. You need to go to a teacher or principal, or go to a teacher and principal and your parents, so that if the teacher doesn't do something and the principal doesn't do something, your parents can contact the police department and say, hey, my child's rights are being violated. Educating the people and giving them the right recipe for success, and also targeting each one of those cases on a case-by-case, not a blanket let's end bullying. Because just like DARE, Say No to Drugs, we spent millions of dollars trying to say no to drugs, but scientifically, at the time, they knew it didn't work. It just made those politicians feel better. So once you enact a treatment, you monitor it, you see if it's truly helping the kids in that school, the people in that community, to address the needs that cause that treatment to be enacted.
Okay, I'm sorry, but oftentimes the parents don't believe the child, so even if the parents don't believe the child because maybe the child has a problem with not telling the parents the honest truth, then what would you do about what would a child do about that situation if the parents don't believe the child?
Excuse me, I don't mean to be rude, but this is really out of his scope of what he's running for. I mean, he's much more local. That's a family issue, and I don't mean to be rude, but I don't want you to
So that
get
answer
yourself
can't
into.
be answered?
I'm sorry.
Are you telling me that answer?
Not that it can't be answered, but I mean, he's running for a U.S. position in Washington D.C., and he can't really legislate what goes on in families.
Okay. Gotcha.
So.
Yeah, it's. I guess what I would tell that kid if they met me and asked me what do I do, my parents don't believe me, I'd say, do you have a phone? Do you have some way to monitor, even an audio recording or something to show evidence to a principal, to a police officer that this is occurring and you are being the victim of any, whatever it is, if you're not being believed?
We have another question from Candace.
Okay.
She's online. She's saying, what are the main things you would be advocating for, if you would?
So that's again, it's as a libertarian, I want less government. So how do I advocate for nothing? and realistically, just so I think, what do I want to improve? The care of health of citizens. But that is not saying I want the federal government to dictate health care to its citizens. I think that's caused more problems than benefits. So when somebody would say, well, we need a hot term Obamacare, but better, I would say, look at the evidence. The evidence is the people in the community are better able to adapt and address the needs of the community than the United States government can. And if you're truly concerned about health care, understand that this will be locked up for generations, and your end goal might never be achieved. So let's get it out of the federal government. Just do away with it. In conjunction to that, I'm a big component of capitalism and free market, that I don't believe the federal government should be subsidizing or bailing out any industry, regardless of what it is. I think that costs us all in the long run. It creates inflation. It causes bad business practices to be rewarded. If I'm the owner of GM or Bank of America and the federal government bails me out, and I still continue the lousy business practices, all the federal government did was reward bad business and hurt the taxpayers as a whole. So there's not one way I can say I'm going to advocate for blank. It's just less federal government control of everybody's life, because to me, Democrat, Republican, Independent, we've all suffered from more and more micro control on the federal level. I know that's not a super easy answer, but hopefully that did answer it.
That kind of went along with what I was talking about as far as the orphanage, foster families, the CPS, the screwed up circuit legal system, and the health and human services. They're kind of tied in more of what you just said, if I understood it right, what I was looking for.
Well, and fundamentally to me, it's each layer of bureaucracy you get, the bureaucracy then has to pay an employee. So that means less money is available to the person that should be helped. And that's, it's like, if I have a sandwich and one of you are hungry, I can just give you the sandwich, correct? But if I have a sandwich and there's a child in China that's hungry, I have no idea how to get that sandwich to China. So to get that sandwich to China, I'm probably going to have to spend $50 to mail it there, to make sure it gets delivered to the kid and all of that. So the sandwich that cost 5 cents now costs, I wasted $50 trying to feed somebody that was hungry on the other side of the world, when I could have just given it to somebody in the room, and immediately that person's needs were fulfilled. And I think that's a lot of my philosophy, regardless of if it's taxation, healthcare. How do the people in the room help the people in the room?
Well, I thought you had some questions the last time, or you don't have any questions this time? Okay.
Your burrito was very good, thank you, sir.
Does anybody else have a question? I wanted to ask anyway, I wanted to make sure everybody else has opportunities. So I think you kind of addressed it, but like, how do you plan to advocate for mental health, like court systems too? Like,
Ooh, that's so.
a lot of and like, you know, kind of like back to this thing earlier, but I just feel like mental health, like you said, mental and physical go together, but overall.
So that's tricky to me because
Okay.
even in mental health, we learned that the criminal justice system is based off precedent and past.
Right.
The mental health field is based off science and ever changing. And in an ideal world, like say I'm a psychiatrist and you're a psychiatrist and you figure out the way to end anxiety, if you will. Immediately you tell me that, and now me and both of you are like, wow, this works. So we spread that around the scientific community, and as quickly as possible, the scientific community or health community institutes that treatment to help people with depression, anxiety, whatever the case is. Criminal justice works the exact opposite. They need a precedent or something to be established here, so then they can reference that back and say, in 1936, this landmark trial established that yada 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 happened. And that, I think the way to go about that is really instituting science in criminal justice and looking at this, because the statistics are there. I can't quote them, but I know that recidivism rates, repeat offenders, when you're dealing with lots of petty crimes, are due to drug use and addiction issues. So if you address the addiction issue, you now reduce the need for criminal justice involvement. And so it's integrating, like I said, integrating mental health and physical health. It's integrating and educating lawyers, judges, starting today, so that in 10, 15 years, we're not in the same place. I don't know if overnight we would ever truly, I don't care what position said, this is how we're gonna run it. I don't think you're going to create that change immediately. Public education, for an example. I think it's got a lot of deficits, but one thing that it could be used for is saying, teaching kids about how science can improve whatever, whether it's the environment, whether it's criminal justice reform, and really valuing science as a school of thought, and saying just because this is the way we've always done it is not a reason to continue doing that way. And then just kind of at times close your eyes and hope that the best situation emerges, because there will, no matter what system, there will always be people that fall through the cracks or victimized by it. I think we're just trying to mitigate that, and I know that's not a clean answer,
Right.
but it's not a simple solution. And if it's not a simple solution, to say, well, it's blank, blank, and blank is injustice to your question.
Right, yeah.
I'd like to ask one more
Yes, sir.
question. With this medication cost, why can't the insurance pay for all the cost of other medication, because it should?
So that's the federal government. Me personally, I don't want them managing a plumber's business. I don't want the federal government managing a rancher's business, because that means they now can give and take funds to that business holder. I also don't want them managing insurance. I firmly believe anytime the federal government does anything, it's wasteful, it's inconsistent, and it's ineffective. In an ideal world, when we're talking insurance, whether it's health insurance, house insurance, car insurance, say you're like you own the insurance. We all pay you, and you're hoping all of our $10 per month, at some point I get in a wreck. Now you're gonna have to cover the cost of my car. Your business model is that all of us together giving you a little a month paid for my new car, correct? That's just like any business. The problem is because insurance, to me, has been this kind of politicized, kind of not politicized, partially in the government, not in the government, it's allowed insurance corporations to lobby politicians to create laws that say, I approve you, but I'm only gonna pay for blank, blank, and blank. When it should be, I've been paying you on a consistent basis. Now your job is to figure out how to pay for my medicine because that's what I paid you to do. Not figure out, oh, I'm gonna pay for this pill, but I'm not gonna pay for your cancer treatment. Then if they as an insurance company accepted you as their responsibility, they have to accept all of it. And that, but going back to, I don't want the federal government mandating insurance, because if the government steps in, that's what's gonna happen, and I think that's gonna cost us all in the long run. It's kind of, to kind of use an analogy, it's like me proving a Bigfoot isn't real. I can't show you what's not there if it's not there, and I can't legislate a good insurance company, because there will always be people that are greedy or trying to victimize people. That's just part of the human experience. I just hope the CEO is a good person and believes in the humanity of the situation and doesn't care about the money. But if you legislate it, I think then we get to be in more problems.
Does anybody have any other questions? Good questions, you guys? Well, let's all, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Great.
I appreciate
Great
you
getting to
guys
hear you.
having me. And thanks for the questions from the
Yes.
internet as well.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate you. Thank you.